Hello and welcome to episode 5 of Majunda Minute. Shit. Welcome. This is actually the second time I recorded this episode to date, because originally I was going to have a guest on. We recorded an episode, but OBS really was performing well and did not record my audio. So all you would be hearing is my guest's audio, who is my guest was the wonderful. Hold on, I should remember this. I talked to him earlier today. Was Spinebreaker, and Spinebreaker. He and I had a very nice conversation about the game, and today I'm going to more or less summarize what we talked about. So what we talked about in general is unique balance, and more or less we went through every single unique in the game and determined whether or not they were balanced or not, and then suggested changes if they needed to be buffed. So we went through. We went in alphabetical order. So we started with Antarctivanator. Antarctivanator is interesting because I feel, and we both agreed on this, that Antarctivanator is actually really balanced. Like, it is the personification of a well-balanced creature. I mean, it is a wild card, so it's got features of all classes, but it doesn't have anything really broken about it, including like this new update, like with the whole revenge, definite rampage, and the increase in health and damage. Antarctivanator is still very balanced. Like, it's still got a very clearly defined weakness, which is its speed and its vulnerability to being slowed, and that its damage is, its damage output is kind of mediocre at times, and that instant ferocity is very situational, stuff like that. So Antarctivanator isn't, busted. It's really good. It's very anti-meta, which that's what I like about it. But then then moving on to Ardentis Maxima. Maxima is kind of in a sad position as the three of the towers, as they're called. Maxima is probably the weakest in terms of both like utility and general use. It doesn't have nearly as much tankiness as Schoonosaurus, and it doesn't have much in terms of defense like Gemini Titan. So what we suggested is bringing its health up to around 5,800, 5,900, and giving it 10% armor. And then with that, Maxima is generally better, without making it incredibly broken like it was during 2.0. Then Compsognathus. Compsognathus only really has two issues I really have with it, and that's its speed decrease immunity and one of its moves. For cunning, I don't think it should have a speed decrease immunity, especially since it's a flocking creature, and flocking creatures are already strong enough as they are, because most of them have ways of healing themselves, and the whole absorbing ability allows them to take pretty strong hits. Their weakness is group attacking, group attacks, which only a select few of creatures do have access to. So my suggestion would be to bring its speed decrease resistance down to a 50%, and also on top of that, replace its cunning strike with distraction, because one of the main counters to it is damage over time, bleed, but with cunning strike they can easily cleanse that, and even with cunning strike removed, they can still cleanse things with hop and mock. So it'd still be a very well-rounded cunning with obvious weaknesses, being weak to resilient class creatures, especially ones with group attacks. Moving on, Dilorachirus. Dilorachirus is in a very sad state. It's got pretty decent stats, like good health, decent damage, well, above average damage, but its speed is lacking for cunning especially, and its move kit is less than desirable. So our suggestion would be, my and Spike, my guest's suggestion was that we Cunning Strike is replaced with Group Accelerating Cunning Strike, and Cunning Impact is replaced with Revenge Cunning Impact. Lesser Group Heal is replaced with Emergency Group Heal, and Greater Emergency Heal is replaced with Stunning Impact. And with that, you've got something far more balanced. Also, on top of that, add in a 50% distraction resistance would help, and then you've got a far more better cunning. Also, I keep forgetting, bring its speed up to like 128, 127, around that range. Make it actually fit the role and better reflect its ancestry. It's got Dinokairos in it, like one of the fastest base cunnings, base commons. So, and as someone whose favorite dinosaur is Dinokairos, it's very sad to see it in such an awful state. Okay, Diorajasaur. Dioraja is, it's got great stats, stats-wise it doesn't need to be adjusted, but it's lost out on speed control with the whole, resistance change. So I have a simple change for Dioraja is give it long decelerating strike for its basic attack, and that's all you really need to do. With that kind of change, Dio has speed control, but still can take advantage of, the additional vulnerability given by Resilient Rampage. And that's simple as that. Trichosaurus doesn't need to be touched. It's fine the way it is. So, same goes with Entellilania. Sure, it loses out on speed control, but that additional damage applied with vulnerability means that Entellilania's base damage output is far more is immense, to say the least. And moving on, Erlodominus. Erlodominus, I say pretty simple change. Bring its vulnerability resistance up to 50%. It was already kind of hit hard with this update with the whole resilient change. So the fact that they brought down its vulnerability resistance is, it hurts it a lot. And other than that, it's a very generally balanced creature. It's a glass cannon. It's built to dish out a lot of damage, but can't take that much damage for itself. Moving on, Erlicospix. And also, if you wonder why I'm going through these fast, is because, we spent 2 hours or so discussing these in depth, and I don't really want to talk about this for a second time by myself for just as long. So this won't be nearly as long as that episode. I will manage to figure out how to get another guest onto the show, so hopefully with that we can actually have a proper discussion. So, moving on, Erlicospix. Erlicospix is kind of in a situation where I don't really know what to do with it. I did suggest that maybe we could make it better reflect its ancestry by replacing Instant Distraction with Maiming Wound. But that could, that might mess with some of its matchups, but that's just me. They kind of made it into a blank slate pure cunning instead of whatever it was beforehand, which was, a cunning fierce, basically. Especially with debilitating distraction being removed. It's certainly not as unique. It's kind of boring. So, if anyone could think of a far more interesting kit for Erlicospix, I would be willing to listen. Gemini Titan. Gemini's fine. Gemini, Gemini doesn't need to be touched. It's fine the way it is. So same goes with Gripelith. Gripelith's fine. Indoraptor. Indoraptor would probably benefit from like some sort of new kit. The thing is, I don't want to give it too much because Indoraptor is very much a starter unique. You only have 2 ingredients for it. And the ingredients themselves are so easily accessible that they're basically given out for free. But my proposal is replace Cleansing Impact with Revenge Distracting Impact, and maybe give it a unique Armor Piercing Rampage that also is precise. Precise Piercing Rampage, allow it to deal with Cunnings a little bit better. And then other than that, like the rest of it can stay the same. Because Cleansing Impact has its use, but most people, it doesn't invite much actual interesting play, because most people either use it on turn 1 or they don't. And if they use it on turn 1 while whatever they're facing, has a negative effect like deceleration, there's not much they can really do afterwards. So, moving on, Magna's fine. I think Magna certainly is kind of struggling right now just because of the swap-in stuff, but that's not really a problem with Magna. That's just a problem with the meta as a whole. Because as much as I hate facing Magnas that are faster than me, I can admit it's a very well-balanced unique. It's got good resistances, very clear weaknesses, but is struggling in a meta that does not benefit it. Then Mammillania. Mammillania is also fine. It's a tank. That's all it's built to be, is a tank. It tanks damage well, and it can dish out an okay amount of damage. Okay, for the other Rhino, Monorhino certainly needs to be touched. Like, it needs to be nerfed in some way. And this is my suggestion. Remove its rend resistance and bring its damage over time resistance to a 50%. I don't care that that Monolometrodon has those resistances. Something with this amount of bulk, like 4,500 health and 30% armor, and can hide behind shields and distraction, should not have rend resistance. Simple as that. It should not have both damage over time and rend resistance, Makes sense? Okay, we agree it makes sense. Moving on. Pucan is fine. It's a little predictable. After, 2 turns, it doesn't have much in terms of options on turn 3, but that's, if you use both of your damaging moves, like in the first 2 turns, which I would not recommend if you, as someone who's been using it, you cycle between them, You cycle between the priority, like distraction and the side flap and the fearless flap and the distracting impact. But yeah, Pucan's fine. It's built to counter Thor and other pure fierces, so it doesn't need to be touched or altered in any way. Okay, Pterovexus. Pterovexus is it's got good resistances, but it just doesn't have anything else going for it. So, what was our suggestion? We wanted to make it more like an actual, make it more like a actual bleeder. So, Minor Swoop is replaced with Lethal Swoop. Nullifying Impact is replaced with, what was it? What did we wanted to replace its Nullifying Impact with? I can't exactly remember. I know it was Lethal Wound, yeah. Yeah, Lethal Wound, and then everything else. Well, and then bring its damage up to 1,300, 1,200, something like that. Decent damage, so it's not completely worthless. Like, because it's got good resistances. It's got a lot of resistances, but only like 2 of them really matter, which is the speed decrease and the, you know, reduced damage. Everything else is kind of okay, I guess, because Pterovexus has very low health, so those resistances aren't going to really do it much. Alright, moving on. Quetzorion is fine. Scorpius Rex Gen 3 is also fine. It's Tyrant, and typically Tyrant tier material is like begging to be hit with a Nerf hammer. But Scorpius doesn't really do anything like that's overtly busted. It's just really good at countering a lot of the stuff in the meta, so it's basically anti-meta. Kind of regret not running it now, but I've unlocked it, but I haven't touched it since because I don't like Scorpius Rex as a design, and I find it fun killing them rather than using them. All right, an actual important threat, Schoonosaurus. Schoonosaurus is a personification of busted, as it was already good before this update, but now it's just so much better. So these were we had quite a few ideas for Schoonosaurus to make it, viable but not like OP. And the main one was removing its counter. The counter is kind of part of what makes Schoonosaurus so busted now. Was because every turn it can apply vulnerability, which you can imagine with a lot of things losing their vulnerability resistance. That's pretty major, especially since it's got great multipliers like a turn 1 rampage and an instant damaging move for the next turn. So remove the medium resilient counter and replace the instant group distracting impact with restricted group distraction, and then maybe tone its armor back, bring it down to like 15%, 20%, because it's already got a massive health pool. So pair that with 30% armor, and that's very difficult. But other than that, and maybe get rid of its distraction resistance. If it's going to keep all these other stats, it's got so many great things going for it. One of these needs to go. A few of these actually need to go. So the the distraction resistance can go. If you want to hit someone, you got to be able to actually hit them, and with no distraction resistance, you actually have to be, smart and be predictive instead of, just relying on your distraction resistance. Moving on. Okay, yeah. Smilonemes. I've talked about Smilonemes so much, and you all know that it's my favorite. So, and I wanted to highlight a rebalance that I can't for the life of me remember who made it. Hold on, I can probably go just check quickly. The change, this proposed change was by Bianu Giar Efez on the Ludia forums. They suggested relatively the stats stay the same, but so 4,200 health, 1,200 damage, 127 speed, 45 or 50% armor, doesn't really matter which. I would prefer 50%. It's kind of Nemi's thing. 5% crit. Abilities stay the same more or less. Shielded, decelerating strike, deliberate prowl, precise pounce. But then this is where it gets interesting. Delayed rampage and run is replaced with precise impact and run, and Nemes gains on escape prowl, which it works like a normal prowl. So when the opponent tries to leave, Nemes will cleanse itself of any negative effects and increase its critical chance for for 2 turns and give itself some dodge. And also they give it a 25% vulnerability resistance. I really like this change. So, and I really hope Ludia, takes this advice, because this is both a very interesting change and not like stupid fucking dumb solution or whatever the balance change idea was for Smile Anemones to just needlessly nerf it for some reason by lowering its armor and giving it a delayed rampage and run. So stupid. I like this change. Alright, moving on. Spinal Constrictor. Spinocon's fine, especially since the delay on Evasive Wounding Strike is not there anymore. Spinocon has opened itself up to a lot more, versatile gameplay and strategies. I really like it. I've been using it frequently. It's a lot of fun to work with. So, it's fine the way it is. Moving on, Stygideryx. Stygideryx has kind of always been in this situation of being bad, just because it has no multipliers and its gimmick isn't the greatest. So the change was replace Resilient Strike with Decelerating Strike, like Long Decelerating Strike or Decel Strike, either works. And then replace Cleansing Swoop with what is in the Stygideryx boss? Stiggy has a move called Group Resilient Scratching Impact, which it's pretty self-explanatory. Cleanses distraction, targets all opponents, reduce dodge, remove dodge, speed decrease, reduce speed 50% for 1 turn, DOT, and damage over time. So if you gave that to Stygideryx would be very, very different. Would be very different and far more interesting. And also, this next part, this is just a fun suggestion. It could probably be either incredibly busted or completely worthless, but maybe give Stygideryx Expose Encounter. Who knows? Might work. And then also, for resistances, give Stygideryx a 100% resistance to speed decrease. Make it like a bleed creature. Bleed creatures are kind of built to not be slowed down. So that's simple enough. Moving on, Tenontorex. Tenontorex certainly did suffer a little bit in this update just because it lost access to speed control. And the change, this is a pretty easy change. You could, and my suggestion is give it Decelerating Strike. Why would I suggest Decelerating Strike instead of Superiority Strike? And I'd say because that kind of similar to Resilient Strike beforehand, for Tenontorex, it could very easily cheese a matchup with a Cunning by just spamming Resilient Strike. So I'm not going to allow that. So Decelerating Strike. If you want to slow someone, you're going to have to decel them. If you want to cleanse their distraction or any kind of negative effect, you're going to have to heal yourself with your group heal. Besides that, the stats, resistances stay the same. Moving on, Testacornibus. Oh boy. Now, I love Testacornibus. And I was happy to see it buffed, but here's the thing. It didn't really need to be buffed in the way it was. The constant heal and the increase in stats and whatnot, Testa was already good. It was just underutilized. But now, since it's good, everybody's using it. And you can imagine, as someone who's been using it since launch, ever since it was released, how it must feel to be kind of just lumped into a group of people who are just using something now because it's suddenly good, instead of someone who's been using it for a long time. So here's my suggestion for Testacornibus. Bring its stats, like its health, damage, and speed and armor, back to what they were beforehand, and replace the cleansing decelerating impact with distracting shield, like when Testacornibus had it when it was released. It can keep the counter power heal and everything else, and then you've gone from something that's super busted and like can basically win any matchup to a tanky, cunning, resilient. But I mean, it still has there's still the issue of proper counters, but that's Ludia's fault for not introducing any pure fierces, or for this case, its counters would be fierce resilience, which there are plenty of. But distracting shield, like, it's something unique, and it would give Testa, like, it'd make it another cunning resilient. We need more of those, for sure, certainly. That would be nice, and it would give players an option, well, more or less, it would give players a decisive decision of, if all these balance changes I suggested were implemented, players would have to choose between what kind of cunning resilient do you want using your Carbonamy's DNA. Do you want greater burst damage with Smilonemes, or with more speed control and general damage mitigation of Smilonemes? Or do you want more tankiness and general stalling in a battle with the possibility of large amounts of damage, with a large amount of damage output? I don't really see that as too much. I mean, either way, if that was true, I'd still run both of them, because I love them both. But yeah, that's my suggestion to fix Testacornibus. If anyone else has some other suggestions, feel free to tell me. I'll be glad to listen to them. Alright, Thorodolsaur, Thor's fine. Thor is Thor. Doesn't need to be touched. Like, all we really need is some more pure fierce uniques, because Thor being the only one is like, it's upsetting. That's why it's so that's why it's so abundant, is because there's no other options besides, like, when you eventually unlock Mortem Rex. And even then, Mortem Rex isn't that good either, especially after this recent balance change. And we'll save Apexes for another update, for another episode, because they're a lot more complicated, apparently. According to the forums, Apex balance is very crucial and very important, and is a delicate process. So I'll take their word on it and save them for another episode. So, moving on. Trichosaurus. Trichosaurus, much like Dio, kind of lost out in the update due to it losing its speed control with Resilient Impact. So I say there's a very simple change and very easy change here, and that's give it Decelerating Impact. So then it'll still have speed control, but it won't be able to reliably cleanse distraction. Balance, like, as all things should be. Yeah, I don't because Trichosaurus is very predictable, so a very simple change should really help with its matchups. Toromoloch is fine, it's a raid creature, it's like what you need to do raids. The only suggestion I would make is just can we introduce some more creatures that have both raid and arena viability, and maybe also some creatures that could compete with Tora as, for being, the best, like for being, the best raid healer. But that's about it. And then finally, Utarinex. Utarinex is also fine, especially with this recent update. It got a little nice buff with the 10% armor and the slight increase in the damage. Because, Utarinex has its place. It's a hard-hitting cunning with a lot of damage potential with some pretty okay resistances. And generally, like, it's, pretty good for a cunning, but, it's still living in a meta full of very overpowered resilience. So, and that's the main issue with Utarinex, is that, like, much like a lot of the other creatures who are, like, typically pure cunning, it's not really that they are bad, it's just that the meta around them isn't preferable. It's not ideal. So, and with that, that's the last of the uniques. And with that, I'm going to start wrapping up this episode. Please let me know what you thought of the episode, especially some of my suggestions. And I would also like to give a large amount of credit to a lot of these ideas to Spinebreaker, who was my guest for today, but, OBS was being a, very difficult program and did not record my audio for the interview, so we'll find a way. Hopefully, we'll have more guests onto the show, and I'll actually figure out a proper way to record both of our audio. And with that, I believe I'm going to end this episode here. So, yeah, new episode will be coming around whenever I get around to recording them. God, I hate these cars. So, see you around. This is Majunda Boa out. Snowball rolling down in the